In the case of Breonna Taylor, not applied. Those whose ancestors survived the Middle Passage are grieving as their loved ones are killed. As they learn to bear this ineffable burden, they also struggle with the fact that most often no one is held accountable, and society is indifferent to the fact that we too are created in the image and likeness of God. For 400 years, the dominant society in this nation has declared God to be a liar, and we are the component of creation that is not good. In fact, God's word was grossly disfigured or whitewashed to support the economic, civic, and social disenfranchisement of those considered less than human, solely for the economic gain of various European crowns and colonists. You see, our systems are corrupted by the biases of the founding fathers and others who sacrificed their dignity by using the flawed construct of race for their personal gain through the stolen labor, the stolen lives of kidnapped Africans. This corruption is the weakest link in all of our systems, including education, employment, financial, healthcare, legal, yes, and even our faith communities. Did we not hear Pope Francis speak to us of Day, King, Lincoln, and Merton, 4 of our own who worked for justice? A native of Alabama, I remember when apartheid was openly and faithfully implemented by those who self-identified as God-fearing Christians. Regardless of our regional stereotypes, I also learned as a child that racism was not confined to the South when I was called the N-word for the first time while sitting on my aunt's porch in Ohio. Unlike chattel slavery, Jim Crow laws reigned from sea to shining sea, as does their legacy. More so, my body carries the post-traumatic slave syndrome, an intergenerational trauma that lives in this body that was taught as a child to say, I'm Black and I'm proud. When I say today's mantra, Black Lives Matter, I am affirming and reclaiming my dignity. I am daring to defy the nation's founding principle of human lives for economic gain. I acknowledge that my mere existence is a blessing of the God of creation, the God of life, the God of love. With this in mind, and with a heavy heart, I will vote.
Thank you, Leslye. Thank you for your witnessing and your every word and every emotion that you've transmitted through what you just shared with us. And now, if we could all take a moment to breathe together, because these are words, this is information that we need to take in very deeply. So let's breathe in. And out. And now, let me introduce to our second panelist, Suyapa Portillo Villeda. Suyapa is an associate professor at the Chicanx, Latinx, and Transnational Studies at Pittsburgh College and member of the Intercollegiate Department of Chicanx Latin Studies at the Claremont Colleges. She's also a dear friend of mine and a Honduran immigrant and co-founder of the May Day Trans Queer contingent. So I'm very excited to have her here with us today. Suyapa.
Thank you for having me. Can you hear me? Thank you for having me today. I want to share a little bit of everything. I just want to say it's so important to have these dialogues, which can help us change the cultural context in this country around immigration. That can help us create communities of conscience, where we can have real discussions about immigration and policies and laws around immigration, right? It's so important that we can have these real discussions with empathy and not with hatred. So I appreciate the space. Thank you for inviting me. As you all know, our immigration system is a broken system. It's what we're working with right now. And, you know, in all political parties, we agree that it is a broken system. However, the way to fix it is not clear, right? We need to center the voices of those people who are most affected in order to fix this broken immigration system, like Central Americans, Hondurans, Guatemalans, Salvadorans, Mayans, Garifuna communities, those affected by the draconian immigration policies, but also U.S. foreign policy, who are not included at the table where discussions and decisions are made, right, and discussions about their lives are made, even in our progressive circles. We must look at the laws and the limitations of the laws as they have been carried out and molded by this administration, which started to do this the first week in office, amping up an exterior and interior enforcement that attacks immigrants, canceling TPS, DACA, and enforcement at the border. So what we are learning from Trumpism is that the U.S. is not the place of refuge or sanctuary that people thought it was or fought for, and it has not been for a long time, if it ever was. This was clear for us Central Americans who came in the 1980s. Let's not forget that under Ronald Reagan, we were invisible and did not benefit from refuge then because the U.S. did not want to be implicated in the dirty wars they were promoting in Central America and all of Latin America. The U.S. has signed on to the Convention on Refugees Act, but that says that we have to provide, it's an obligation, an international obligation for us to accept refugees, but the Trump administration is trying to sidestep this by limiting the number of refugees, trying to stop people at the borders without due process, having people apply at the border for refuge in Mexico or in Guatemala in third country agreements. The issue with asylum in this country is that the burden for proving asylum falls on the immigrant. And when you're fleeing danger, oftentimes with the clothes on your back, you know, with nothing on you, it's hard to prove how dangerous it is to go back home or where you come from, right? You simply don't have the proof with you when you're seeking asylum. At the border, in detention centers, these abuses are gendered and sexualized forms of oppression against Central American immigrant women, Mexican immigrant women. Recent reports of hysterectomies without consent conducted on immigrant women at the Irwin County Detention Center in Atlanta, for instance, right? That's a very specific type of violence against cisgender women, right? Immigrant women who have not given their consent. We also saw the murder of Roxana Hernandez at the Cibola Detention Center, a trans woman, who was sick and wasn't given proper care, transferred to multiple detention centers before she died in New Mexico. We've seen the murders and deaths of children, other trans women, actual like videos of people being shot at the border, or Mayan children, for instance, right? The most vulnerable victims of a genocide that killed over 200,000 people since the coup d'etat orchestrated by the US in 1954 and during the wars, the dirty wars in Central America in the 1980s. What this shows us is that ICE is not working, that it is leading, that it is actually leading the decline of our society. When people can die in detention and nobody reacts or cares or questions our elected officials or protest detention centers, it means we condone human rights violations. Our society is not viewing immigrants as humans. To me, it's a clear decline of a nation and a people. Thinking about the U.S. role in Central America, the clearest example of the U.S. abuse of power is Honduras during the coup in 2009, which was coordinated by Hillary Clinton during the Obama administration. It just, to me, illustrates, one of the classic cases in the 20th century. But guess what? This happened in the 21st century during an administration where we wanted and where we thought we would have a different type of U.S. Rule. And the worst is that we continue to support as U.S. As the United States, we continue to support narco dictators that have led to severe corruption and degradation of the rule of law. For 11 years since the coup d'etat, there has been extreme violence at the hands of the state, military police, police and military police. It has brought human rights violations, the destruction of the Constitution and democracy, the murders of thousands of people, including trans women, cisgender women, and femicides, and children, culminating in the exodus in the fall of 2018 of over 2,000, perhaps even more Hondurans leaving Honduras. Honduras is inhabitable, and U.S. foreign policy, free trade agreements like the DR-CAFTA, model cities, mining and tourist investments and concessions, militarism, corruption during elections, and so much more debauchery by the narco dictator have generated so much poverty, death, and destruction to make it so. In fact, our Congress people don't seem to make the connection between immigration law and foreign policy. But to us immigrants, it's clear. In 2006, one of our leaders, Berta Cáceres, was murdered despite having protections because she called out the U.S. foreign policy, because she integrated these two ideas into her organizing and her work. And to this day, we haven't seen any prosecution of anybody. But one thing we can do here in the United States is support the Berta Cáceres bill, which would bill HR 1945, the Berta Cáceres Bill for Human Rights in Honduras Act, which would prohibit U.S. assistance to the national police and military in Honduras and to prevent this corruption. So what now, right? What do we do now in this situation, and why is voting so important? Well, we vote because we defend and protect the most vulnerable, and that is our call to action. Last Monday, the Ninth Circuit Court has ruled in favor of the Trump administration. Now, in the TPS case, the temporary protected status case, now people with temporary protected status, many of them Hondurans, over 300,000 families, right, are looking at deportation as of March 5th, 2021. And what are they doing instead of sitting around and worrying about it? TPS holders boarded La Libertad in the jornada, the journey for justice, right? La Libertad is a bus, and they are visiting Congress people in every state, Republican Congress people in every state, to talk to them about the need for legalization for all. So if you are in one of those states where the TPS Alliance will be coming, please support, please show your support and show up for immigrants. If you can't do that, then definitely vote, and vote your conscience, to make sure that people like these 300,000 law-abiding citizens who don't have papers can actually stay in this country. The other thing to remember is that these programs are temporary, such as DACA or TPS. One of the issues with the decision, we're happy about the DACA and the decision in the Supreme Court, but remember that it also doesn't lead to a path for legalization. So what TPS holders are saying is, we've proven our worth in this country. We deserve refuge from places like Honduras, where they will certainly break their families apart to be deported, will go face a corrupt government. So for us, when we vote, those of us who can vote, we must vote our conscience, and we must really vote thinking about creating better policies. Who will be someone that will help us create better policies? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Suyapa, for those words and for giving us call to actions, because people really feel that they want to support all these different actions taken by people directly impacted. But we all really need just concrete calls to actions. And so for that, I really thank you. And so I also want to invite all our viewers to please type your questions on the chat, and we will be gathering them. And at the end of the conversations, we will be sharing them with our participants. And so now for our next speaker, I'd like to introduce Marie Dennis. Marie Dennis is a senior advisor to the Secretary General of Pax Christi International, the Global Catholic Peace Movement. She was co-president of Pax Christi International from 2007 to 2019 and serves on the executive committee of Pax Christi's Catholic Nonviolence Initiative. Marie was one of the primary organizers of April 2016 and April 2019 conferences in Rome on nonviolence and justice that were co-sponsored by the Vatican and Pax Christi. She's currently serving on the Vatican's COVID-19 Commission. Marie was previously director of the Maryknoll Office for Global Concerns. Marie?
You need to unmute, Marie.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Clearly, we are standing at a crossroads, facing great dangers, but also significant opportunities. COVID-19 has thrown into sharp relief the contemporary global culture of violence, especially, though not only in the United States. It's interlocking unjust systems that perpetuate racism and exclusion, poverty and environmental degradation, the suffering it imposes on billions of people, and its incapacity to respond effectively and comprehensively to the current crisis or to other real monumental challenges facing the whole Earth community. This global culture of violence, on the one hand, is a humongous, powerful economy that thrives on war and on the production and marketing of weapons, from nuclear weapons to small arms, which are the weapons of mass destruction in the global South, and handguns, the weapons of mass destruction in our own country. And on the other hand, is rooted in our nuclear arsenal. Years ago, many years ago, Jesuit Father Dick McSorley said, "The taproot of violence in our society today is our intent to use nuclear weapons. Once we've agreed to that," he said, "all other evil is minor in comparison." Militarism and nuclear weapons, two central concerns of Pax Christi USA as we approach the elections. Excuse me. The coronavirus pandemic has demonstrated clearly that spending hundreds of billions of dollars annually, literally, on weapons, preparation for war, and militarized security forces has stolen resources from providing for healthy, resilient communities that can slow the spread of disease and more quickly recover from very real crises like COVID-19. Our strength is not in military might. Our bloated military budget is an immense scandal that robs people of healthcare, education, housing, and jobs. But transformation of our war economy will require courage, creativity, and sacrifice that is hard at this point in time to even imagine. Responding to the pandemic, both in the short term and the longer term, will require a fundamental shift from what has become an unjust normal of systemic and structural violence, from systems that destroy, dehumanize, and diminish, to a culture that seeks the fullness of life for all. In other words, this crisis is amplifying what Pax Christi USA has been saying for decades, that the United States needs a fundamentally new understanding of strength and security based on diplomacy, dialogue, reciprocity, and a multicultural, collaborative approach to solving very real and critical global problems. In other words, we need a radical transformation of US foreign policy. Authentic strength and security in which we and the whole Earth community can thrive will emerge only from serious attention to meeting basic human needs on a global scale. At the international level, global cooperation in a spectrum of nonviolent actions is urgently needed to establish just and effective institutions with the authority and capacity to govern an increasingly complex world. Nationally and locally, we need to elect responsive, accountable, and fair public officials who write and uphold the rule of just laws, provide safe space for a vibrant, multicultural civil society, and protect basic human rights. Pax Christi rejects the militarization of policing, whether it is aimed at social justice protesters, people of color, or migrants seeking refuge in the United States. A future that is nonviolent and reflects the values of Catholic social teaching can be built during and following this global crisis if we apply tested strategies of active nonviolence to reshaping our broken world. To do so, we need to cultivate creative moral imagination that understands nonviolence as a dramatic alternative to business as usual, a cross-cutting approach to the multiple violences at the root of human vulnerability exposed by COVID-19. We need to challenge the two normal patterns of violence against each other and the natural world with powerful, nonviolent love in action. Pope Francis has underscored again and again the Church's yearning for peace and disarmament. He has decried the world war being fought piecemeal. He's called for the world to transform our conflicts without violence. He's emphasized integral ecology. He's highlighted the tremendous profit in war making and in marketing and trafficking in weapons. And he's called even the possession of nuclear weapons morally unjustifiable. In January 2017, he wrote his World Day of Peace message on nonviolence, a style of politics for peace, on nonviolence as a spirituality, a way of life, and an important strategy for transforming conflict, preventing violence, and protecting vulnerable communities, a third way between violence and passivity. Central to his interest in nonviolence is Pope Francis' determination to rid the world of nuclear weapons. Since 2014, less than 2 years after he was elected, Pope Francis has tried to move the nuclear powers more and more surely to nuclear abolition. In the Holy See message to the 2014 Vienna Conference on the humanitarian consequences of a nuclear exchange, at the Vatican Conference on Nuclear Disarmament in 2017, most recently during his visit to Japan a year ago, Pope Francis has decidedly shifted the Catholic commitment to nuclear abolition beyond a strictly limited acceptance of deterrence to a moral rejection of even the possession of nuclear weapons. The Holy See strongly supported the nuclear ban treaty in 2017 and has been acting ever since then to rid the world of the taproot of violence in our society with nuclear weapons. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marie. You've given us so much good information to consider and things that we usually don't hear, right? We don't tend to get all this information from formal education even. And so where is all this information hidden? Why are we not given all this information to really get to have an analysis that lets us understand what we need to do at a local level, at a national level, and you know, with our international organizations as well. So now, all that said, let me introduce our next speaker, Bishop John Stowe. He is the Bishop President of Pax Christi USA. Bishop Stowe is a conventual Franciscan friar and has served as the Bishop of Lexington, Kentucky since May of 2015. For the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, he has served on the Committee for the Catholic Campaign for Human Development, the Bishops' Anti-Poverty Initiative. And not much else to say. He is the bishop. Bishop Stowe?
Thank you. You know, in 2015, Pope Francis issued an encyclical called Laudato Si. The name is taken from St. Francis's beautiful poem about the interrelatedness of all of creation. And at that time, when the Pope issued Laudato Si, he issued an urgent call, not only for dialogue, but for the kind of conversion that would be necessary to preserve our common home, a phrase that he likes to use to describe this planet. It was the same year, 5 years ago, that the Pope visited the United States and made that plea before the joint houses of Congress. And as much as he has made that plea and elevated the care of creation in all of the teachings of our Catholic social teaching tradition, the sense of urgency has been overlooked or undermined in the current administration. I'd like to read a paragraph from Laudato Si that speaks, I think, directly to the moment in which we're living and the choices that we are facing in a few weeks. The Pope said, "Doomsday predictions can no longer be met with irony or disdain. We may well be leaving to coming generations debris, desolation, and filth. The pace of consumption, waste, and environmental change has so stretched the planet's capacity that our contemporary lifestyle, unsustainable as it is, can only precipitate catastrophes, such as those which even now periodically occur in different areas of the world. The effects of the present imbalance can only be reduced by our decisive action here and now. We need to reflect on our accountability before those who will have to endure the dire consequences. Rampant individualism and the self-centered culture of instant gratification make it very difficult to address the environmental challenge." We were hearing moments ago about the COVID-19 pandemic, and the Holy Father has called us repeatedly during this time to work together because it's the only way that we're going to transcend this moment and overcome this pandemic. I think among the most prophetic things that he has said during this time is when he posed the challenging question, how could we think we could remain healthy in a world that has become so sick? And the sickness that he describes is very much what Leslye described earlier on, that willingness to exchange human lives for economic gain. I think that's a thread running through everything that is being said tonight. And it's especially pronounced in our approach to the environmental issues. And at this moment, our witnessing of an administration that has worked hard to undermine all of the little progress that had been made so far to bring us together in preservation of our common home. from opening up drilling in Arctic places and on national park lands to putting pipelines through Native American homelands with complete disregard for their rights and their traditions and their cultures, from the willingness to dump toxic waste in the poorest neighborhoods and in the poorest areas of the country, from an inability to hear those whose lives are directly affected by cancer-producing agents that have been introduced into the atmosphere. In my own part of Appalachia, where countless closed coal mines have had dams burst and have destroyed water supplies, and where most of the water available in the area of my diocese is substandard. There's been so much destruction, even in our mountain areas where the mountaintops themselves have been removed for the mining of coal. We've seen so much done to our sister Earth. And the COVID pandemic might very well be our last dress rehearsal opportunity for what is coming if we don't act quickly, if we don't act globally, if we don't act collaboratively with others. When the so-called leader of the free world, the leader of an administration, can use his personal vendetta against a predecessor to undermine our own participation and destroy our reputation as a leader in the world for green energy and for the change that is necessary to bring about a better economy as well as the preservation of the planet, we're talking about a kind of self-centeredness that more than epitomizes what is wrong and what has led to the destruction that we experience. Pope Francis calls for a conversion of attitudes. We can't raise the whole world to the standard of living that we have come accustomed to in the United States, at least the well-off in the United States have become accustomed to. We have to learn sacrifice. We have to learn what it is to work in collaboration with the land. We have to discover the traditions of our ancestors as they continue to be lived in the Amazon and in cultures that we in the West sometimes refer to as primitive, but because they are connected to the land and they know about sustenance, they know about what it takes to participate in the cycle of life. Pope Francis is never a man that loses optimism and hope. He knows that what is within the human person, made in the image and likeness of God, is an ability to overcome these things because we are social creatures. We are in this together, and we can transcend our differences. As we face an election in a few weeks, we have one candidate who is leading us to more and more division, more and more selfish kind of thinking, more and more materialistic ways, more and more saying that might makes right, and that some people are worthy and other people are not worthy. I don't see how that can in any way be compatible with a vision that would require what needs to happen for the saving of the planet and for the flourishing of the human family. What is the preeminent pro-life issue? The preeminent pro-life issue is what allows life to flourish. And if we can't take care of our environment, if we can't take care of our planet, if we can't hand on this beautiful gift of creation to future generations, and if we can't learn how it all works together, this great biodiversity that is the beautiful world that we have been entrusted to care for, if we choose instead to be divided, if we choose instead to spend our resources on destruction and weapons, if we choose instead to separate and classify people, expel those who are trying to survive and push them away, we're undermining our last chance for survival as a people, or may very well be. We need a savior, of course, and that savior has come and taught us a path to fraternity, a path to overcoming these differences. Let's bear that in mind as we make our choices.
Thank you for your words, Bishop Stowe. I echo your effort to uplift Indigenous people from other parts of the world, including in my neck of the woods in South America, who are in this struggle of looking after Pachamama. And it's hard, and they're being killed every day, getting murdered every day. It was also mentioned by Suyapa how our compañera Berta Cáceres was murdered as well because she was trying to defend the river there. She's an indigenous Lenca woman who was trying to defend the river there. And so it is so crucial that we think about the fact that we need to, voter conscience in such a way that makes sure that not only people in the US, but also from across the globe are safe, are live a life with dignity. And so for that, I think it's so important to bring something that is called character, right? And I had the opportunity to read a chapter that Bishop Stowe shared with us from Kathleen Kavanaugh. And in one of the lines was really interesting to me when she said, voting is a crude instrument for setting a community's social and political direction. Sometimes the best one can do is to prevent a deadly crash here and now in the hope of setting a better course down the road. And so that lets me, helps me think about how the work that we do will not end at election day, right? The work that we do needs to keep going, needs to improve and to get more organized. And so I just want to open up the floor to our panelists and ask you about this question of character, how important it is to consider the character of the leaders who will make these decisions.
Roxana, I would say that the article that you're citing by Kathleen Kavanaugh talks very much about the fact that in an election, we are electing people. And while the church and organizations like ourselves cannot endorse people, cannot take partisan stance in an election capacity and have to teach issues, in the end, the choice that the voter makes is for the person who's going to enact a policy or work against a policy, the person who brings a set of values and a worldview or the lack thereof, brings a history, brings an understanding. And then we also have to think about the office that we're electing a person for and what is that office's authority and power in relationship to the issues being considered. So it's a complex issue to make a moral choice in voting, but character certainly has to be a profound part of what we are looking at when we're choosing the leader of a nation and the nation that considers itself a leader in the world.
Thank you. Thank you for those words. And I will open up the floor to whoever else would like to talk about that. Or
I think that character is important in that I may not agree with every decision that an individual makes, but if that is a person who is of character, a person who has integrity and a moral compass, then even if I disagree with the person, I am able to respect the decisions that the person makes.
That's good.
I guess the other approach that I would take in thinking about character has to do with how a leader's character has an impact on the character of a nation, and especially on the character of future generations. I think that when the character of a visible leader is very negative and very humiliating, I think that it pulls down the spirit and character of the whole country, and just the opposite. A leader who exhibits integrity and strength of character, I think, sets a higher bar for the rest of us and for future generations. So I think it's important beyond how an individual behaves, but it has to do with how we all behave.
Yes, thank you for that. I will also quickly invite the the attendees to ask your questions on the chat, and we will be reading them very soon. Suyapa, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you. No, I've been thinking about this, and I'm an educator, so I work with young people. Oftentimes, young people that this is their first election. I have first-year students in college, and they will vote for the very first time. And when I think about character, I think about the definition of character, right? The mental and moral qualities distinctive to an individual. I encourage my students to vote. Obviously, in my classes, presenting all kinds of information, but often because of what we're watching happen in many of the cities around, like New York or Atlanta or Florida, and states and cities, many of the students, we talk about this, right? Like, who do we want as our next president? Can we trust in these moral qualities that we're seeing in Trumpism, right? Can we trust what the kinds of behaviors that we're seeing in my classroom? We try to respect individuals. We try to use language that's respectful of our community members. We have community rules, right? But it's really hard to teach when you're seeing what you're seeing now, right? When Twitter says horrible things about community members that we are trying to instill, in our students and our young people respect for. It's challenging, it's complicated, right? Everything has to be dialogued in my classroom precisely because of this, right? Even the uses of the word, the I word, right? The bad word for, comes up in my class, right? Why don't we use that word? Because we're trying to bring people together to unite communities, not break them apart. And so, this administration has made it hard in the classroom, to be really honest with you. And so I think students are watching one thing and then hearing another thing in our classes. So I don't want to go forever, but just, for me, character is about providing leadership, about uniting people, not dividing people, and doing everything possible to sustain human life.
Thank you. Yes, Twitter is the assassination of character that happens on Twitter is unreal. And we all have to deal with that. Unfortunately, there are some good ways to utilize technology, and Pope Francis talks about that as well. But there are definitely many other ways to not be helpful to the conversation. As you mentioned, Suyapa, so many things that the youth are hearing from social media that is just not conducive to promoting conversations and to really talk about the issues that we're going through in a constructive manner. Well, another thing that I believe is important to mention, and of course Leslye already have talked about this, is what happened in Kentucky. And we have one of the bishops of Kentucky here, of course, and would love to hear from him, but from everyone. And it is what happened with the case of the murder of Breonna Taylor, and how the people who are responsible for her killing are not going to face, we're not going to get justice on this case, basically. So I'm just going to open up the floor and let you all talk about what you're feeling right now. And I think it's that it really is about feeling, because the justice system is obviously not working. They're creating ways to let murderers go free. And this is not new. People of color have faced this since the very invasion of this side of the world. But more and more people are recognizing that this is a systemic issue. And so please, I'll open up the floor and we would like to hear from y'all.
I would just like to say that there seems to be a perversion of hate everywhere. And I think that's the most
Sorry, I was referring to the people who are the panelists right now. Thank you.
As a resident of Kentucky, it was horrifying to see the Attorney General get up and tell people that the law would not allow him to prosecute somebody who carried out this atrocity. And he gave all kinds of explanations in legalese about what works and what's permitted by law, but it reinforced why so many people are rightly insisting that we have to say Black Lives Matter. Because in this case, it just showed that the system doesn't take that for granted. The system doesn't guarantee that. The vast majority of the protests that we're seeing have been peaceful, and Breonna Taylor's family has come out so many times asking everyone to honor her memory by keeping things peaceful and also not giving any excuses to those who are resisting for the reforms that they're calling for. We don't want to give any more ammunition, so to speak, to those who are opposed to the kind of police reforms. There's a lot of suffering going on, and a commitment to nonviolence means we have to absorb so much of that suffering. We have to be able to hear that suffering. We have to be able to walk with that suffering and then build up resistance to the causes of that suffering. So I'm really pleased to see multiracial groups of people out marching and demonstrating and working for change. I think it's going to be a stimulus for many people to vote. And this is not the end of the story, but hopefully a new beginning.
Thank you. And thank you for those words. It's incredible that they're coming up with, as you mentioned, all these legalese to try to try to explain why they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. And again, it's always been this way, right? Who else would like to say a few words? Marie?
Well, maybe just the hope of this moment is that this has been going on for so many years, hundreds of years. I think it is positive that it is being identified as, yes, personal racism, but also systemic and structural racism. And I think that that it is a challenge that we have to not let that pass. That I think Black Americans and others of color have known for so long that this was structured into the way the system works, and I think that this on this round we have got to do something about it. I think there has been plenty of research, plenty of exposure and analysis that tells us what we need to do, what we need to change, and I think that beginning with our justice system and our educational system and on, it seems to me that when we begin to understand that this is not a surprise, that racism is a form of violence, that our living nonviolence has to become a way of living in an anti-racism way. And I think those of us who have benefited from the system, who have been blind to the consequences of the systemic and structural racism that's part of our country, have got to do something about it. And I think it's a big challenge.
Thank you. And I think we definitely rest on the shoulders of many freedom fighters who have been organizing hundreds of years now, including ancestors of ours in throughout this, what is called now the Americas. Leslye and Suyapa?
I think that this has the potential to be a Kairos moment. It is, when I was a child, the world saw what happened when we demanded our rights in nonviolent ways, and Bull Connor in Birmingham put the fire hoses on innocent people. I think in a similar way, the murder of George Floyd is showing that the mindset of Bull Connor lives on, and hopefully the multiracial marches that we are seeing will give rise to significant progress in the racial arena. I have come to the realization that it will not be resolved in my lifetime, which is, you know, as a child during the civil rights movement, you think that the change will happen and will be of a significant impact, which it was. But as a child, you don't realize how heinous the mindset of white supremacy is. Those of you who are familiar with the South know what kudzu is. And during the Great Depression, one of the job programs that the president began was for people to plant kudzu. It looks really nice when you see it. It's a vine, it's got huge green leaves, and it stops soil erosion. So soil erosion was a problem, and that was a way to create work so that those who were unemployed could provide for their families. Well, as nice as kudzu looks, I just saw a fresh area yesterday where it's nice and green. It literally takes over. So it stops the soil erosion, but then it takes over everything else in sight. And when I think of racism, I see that it is that strong and deeply rooted into so many aspects of our lives that we can't even fathom it. And so my hope is that this is a Kairos moment, and that although everything will not be set in balance, made well, or healed, that significant progress will be made.
Yes. And really just to build on that, thinking about how this is definitely a always progress, right? Like a work in progress. So I tend to think about what we're doing as the pathway that we have to walk together. There's really not like an ultimate goal or a place where we will find where, you know, everything is solved, but each moment of joy and of accompaniment is the victory. So along the way, we have victories. And I think this gathering here is a victory. We're talking about this and we're discussing and we're putting together new documents to really talk about and dissect these different issues and connect them. Because how are we talking about these issues in silos? That's just not possible. And so how are we connecting all these different issues when we gather? And now, Suyapa, would you like to add anything?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for all those words. You know, I'm extremely thankful to the Movement for Black Lives for their organizing, for their thinking through what needs to happen in each city in the United States where they have chapters, for the materials they've put together for educators, for people who want to get involved. I think that, you know, our history here as people of color is deeply influenced by the history, you know, of Black organizers, you know, of people that showed us what rights should look like and what we need to do. And so that's what I think the Movement for Black Lives Matter is doing for the generation of youth that I'm teaching now. And I'm thankful to them for that, because their model of organizing is intersectional. It gives us opportunities to connect other struggles like immigration, prison systems, right? Poverty. And I'm particularly deeply thankful for their call for mutual aid, a fundamental belief for us in Central America, right? And for working class communities, how to survive by helping each other. So I encourage you to take a look at the website for Movement for Black Lives, and encourage to get to know organizers in your city, right? And for the education that they've brought to the table, to institutions, to universities, to cities, to police departments. So I think the media mischaracterizes this incredible field work that the Movement for Black Lives is doing in communities, in working class communities, in poor communities, to find, to bring changes, right, about in local city governments, in police, and to address the deep-seated white supremacy in the entire system that we're seeing, right? And I agree, with what was said before. It might not be in my lifetime, but I'm so very thankful that it is on the table for many of the young people that I work with.
Thank you, Suyapa. And also mentioning how important it is to really take a closer look at the descendants of people from the Global South, and how people, Black communities are organizing, and the entire Global South is organizing in different ways, and how we've been resisting for hundreds of years, and how we are getting interconnected as well, and starting to strategize together, from Palestine to Mexico to South Africa. We are really building something that has been obviously on the works for so long, but we're continuing that work. And also thinking about how we all say Black Lives Matter, because when this sort of spectrum was formed of, a white wealthy man and a Black poor person was created, like a lot of us fall in between. So there is no liberation without Black liberation. And that's why we all say Black Lives Matter. And so now we are going to take some questions from the chat that have been shared there. One of them is something that several people have referenced to, and that is, and I'm going to read it, we have heard several highly publicized instances of priests telling people that as Catholics, we have to vote for Trump. How do we overcome this kind of rhetoric that identifies our Catholicism with only one political party or ideology? And I'm going to open the floor to y'all.
I hesitate to answer first every time, but I think people are waiting on something from me in this case. I'm really upset when I see those kinds of things. First of all, we're not in a position to determine who is and isn't Christian or Catholic. That's something that happens to be a title given to the baptized, and it's God who makes those choices. So we shouldn't be labeling each other in the first place. But that narrow focus on Trump, we have to recognize, first of all, that there's an organized campaign. There is a lot of money being put into a campaign to convince sincere Catholics that abortion is the only issue that matters. And unfortunately, the faithful citizenship documents come from the bishops, which say you can't be single issue voters, also turn around and say that abortion is the most important issue. So it leaves people with this quandary about what is supposed to be done. But as many of the comments in the chat have said, the church cannot, and individual priests or bishops cannot endorse, that is against our tax-exempt status to be endorsing individual candidates. We do have to give people the materials and teaching to make informed choices. Like Pope Francis says, we don't, our job is to form consciences, not replace consciences. People have to make deliberate choices for themselves. Another comment in the chat said, well, why don't we just say Catholics for Biden? It's for the same purpose. There is no candidate who fully represents the church's teaching, the fullness of the church's teaching, even on the issue of human life. So we've always had to make choices. Sometimes a choice is the lesser of two evils. Sometimes a choice is very clear. One is much stronger. But that's where we get into the area of character. That's where we get into the area of what is the role of the leader in a globalized world. Who wants to separate us from the world, and who wants to be engaged in leading a world to come to solutions? There are so many issues that have to be at play here, but nobody should be making those endorsements, much less telling people they can't vote for a candidate and remain in the church.
Thank you, Bishop. And that's why we bring to light all these different issues so people can also consider them when they make that decision. And I invite any other panelists who would like to say something.
I happen to be a sister, a religious sister, and I.
Oh, and for now, we are trying to get the panelists to participate because we don't have a whole lot of time. We only have 8 more minutes, and then we have to wrap it up. And we, if we can hear from them before we finish, but you are welcome to put your comments on the chat, and we will definitely be addressing those later on. Thank you.
I agree with what Bishop Stowe said. It angers me when I hear that clergy are promoting a candidate, and I'm sorry, that's a really sensitive spot, because there are so many people who want to be handed answers to questions instead of struggling with the questions themselves. Sadly, they don't have, I guess, the capacity of self-knowledge to realize that they are equipped with the capacity to make decisions. Read, ask questions, spend time in discernment to reach the answer that is that comes from within you. Sadly, there are too many that just want to be told what to do, and there are many who are willing to fill that void. So it's very disturbing when it happens.
Thank you for that. Yeah, it's somehow missing, in religious terms, the Holy Spirit talking to us, right? And
Yes.
why are we not listening? Why are we not listening?
Yes.
But listening takes understanding, and to understand, we must study. And so that's one of the goals of Pax Christi, and that's why we're doing this today. I would like to hear from at least one more person before we start wrapping up this conversation. Or both our panelists who are left.
I can say, as a lay person, but someone who spent a lot of time working with immigrant communities, before I was a professor, I was an organizer, a union and community organizer. And, there's a lot of people in the community, not just certain pastors or priests telling people about how to think about things and how to vote. And there's a lot of power there, right? Because people listen. And so one of the things that I always remind community members of, and also my students, is that you do have to struggle with figuring out the answers to things, right? That you have to think critically, deeply, and historically before making decisions. And that the moment that someone tells you how to do things and how to, what to do, I remind them I come from a country where we lived in dictatorship from 1963 to 1980, and I still think we're in a dictatorship post coup d'etat, where your vote was the only hope that people had. I grew up with stories of my grandma talking about protecting ballot boxes, or my mother protecting ballot boxes. And so to them, the vote is so private and so holy and so important that they've passed that value on to me. And I like to remind people of that history. Many of us immigrants come from countries where we didn't have access to a vote, where we were forced to accept military governments. And so, we must make those decisions for ourselves. It is a precious right, a right that many people fought for and died for. So we must make that our own decision.
I would certainly agree with everything that's been said, and maybe just one small addition, which would be, I think that in that process of decision making, the role of community is very important. And so communities of discernment, wherever we find them, in our families, in our neighborhoods, in our parishes, in our universities, help us understand what we're seeing, what our experience looks like, and most especially that our communities, more diverse our communities are, the richer will be our capacity for discernment. So I totally agree, and would just sort of add that as a footnote.
Thank you for that. And yes, the importance of discernment. It seems like in many of the formal spaces that we have spent time in, we really haven't been taught to discern, to really think by ourselves. And that is so crucial to be part of our communities and to make decisions that will affect us all within the spaces where we're able to vote and beyond, right?
Right. I've got one more important skill that we need to encourage: critical thinking.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
Yeah, do you want to say more about that, Leslye? That is definitely very important.
Well, it's not to accept everything at face value. If an elephant is standing on a mouse's tail, what the elephant tells you is going to be different than what the mouse tells you.
Mm-hmm.
And then the mouse that just missed the elephant's foot is going to tell you something else. So we need to recognize that. When there's a traffic accident, you could have 4 people in one vehicle, and each will have a slightly different variation on what happened. And it enriches us when we are able to think and critique what is being presented to us.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Marie, did you want to add anything?
No, just totally agree. I and it is a skill that I think in our country, our educational systems have tended not to teach us critical thinking, because that is a dangerous activity. And so I think we need to learn it very well and enable it to be a dangerous activity.
Thank you. And we'll have to end at that with that little piece of wisdom from, all of you really have said so many great things. And just to wrap up, I will say that I want to have a little moment of gratitude with everyone. And this is something that maybe you don't get to experience on every Zoom meeting, but I think we need to do this more often and just talk about our gratitude. So I will model it, but I also would like to invite people to mention something that you're grateful for on the chat. And we're gonna gather all this and address it later and hopefully share it later on. But so I want to say that I am very grateful for the people who are putting themselves out there to talk about these issues, to connect all these struggles, and to encourage people to take a step, right? To make plans and to not stop at on November 3rd, but to keep going, to keep organizing, to find community, to find not only, as I call it, not only blood family, but also community family. So I'm thankful also for the team at Pax Christi USA, many of them with different roles right now, handling things that have to do with Zoom. So for all the participants, of course. So now I'm gonna open it up to the participants if they would like to say any words of gratitude.
I'm certainly grateful for all those who have led the way in the struggle. People of color, people who are descendants of slaves, people who have experienced oppression firsthand, people who suffer discrimination, and continue to be people of hope and give hope to the rest of us.
I'm grateful for the many, many millions of people around the world, including in our own country and our own society, who day by day are acting for justice nonviolently in their own context and are helping us to understand what nonviolence looks like.
Sorry, I had muted myself. I'm grateful for the legacy of John Lewis, who his hometown is actually only 50 miles from mine, and that's where I am now. So grateful for those who are continuing to do the work, those who are able to go out and march, and other acts of resistance to the violence that is perpetuated so easily and callously upon so many. And I am grateful for Pax Christi bringing us all together tonight to be in community with you all from all over.
Thank you.
I am grateful for immigrants and for justice fighters, working class people, the people that pick our vegetables, the people that drive us around, the people that are working at the supermarkets, the healthcare workers. I am here because of workers. So I'm very thankful for them, immigrant workers as well, and also for the TPS holders. Don't forget, they're going to come to your neighborhood. Make sure that you support them, that you let your congresspeople know about temporary protected status and the need to pass HR 6. And so I'm thankful for their struggle. They've taught me so much.
Thank you.
I'm grateful for Father Bernard Quinn, who was a priest who lived in the Brooklyn diocese, who spent his life advocating for and serving Black Catholics in Bedford-Stuyvesant in Brooklyn, New York. And my having come to an awareness of his life and the work that he has done. And seeing that as someone who I can pray for and pray to and call others to pray to teach us how to be people who stand with one another, especially those who are being left. I'm just grateful.
Thank you. I think we might have missed the last part, but so now, yes, if anybody else would like to unmute and like take 30 seconds to just say one word. I know we're very many, but we're going to stop it right at 7:30 so we can all go get dinner. So if a person wants to say, I'm grateful for boom, that would be great. And then we can keep going. How about that? Who wants to go next? Unmute yourselves.
I'm grateful for Zoom.
I'm grateful for Pax Christi.
I'm grateful for everyone that's here today.
I am grateful that we continue in the face of all adversity together as a people.
I'm grateful for the Sisters of Mercy on this Mercy Day as they continue to fight for justice for all.
I'm on. I'm grateful for all of you. I'm very grateful to be Catholic, and I am grateful to live in the United States with all our problems, and I hope we can move ahead and make it better.
I'm grateful for women activists like Diana Ortiz and Jennifer Harbury.
I am grateful for the positive aspect of all that we've said.
I'm grateful for the Kings Bay plowshares and their sacrifice and their witness.
For those who emphasize contemplation as well as action, I think both are so important.
I am grateful for Bishop John Stowe and for his words, which I've recorded to bring to other places.
Considering the climate that we're in, we'd be fools to ignore the politics. But that's what's most disappointing because
You're on.
Yes, I am grateful for meeting everyone today and having the history of meeting my best friend Miriam Fraser, who led me into Pax Christi, understanding the struggle, of everybody, and feeling very proud of myself, my ancestors, and everybody, because everybody's lives matter and Black lives matter.
Thank you. We are at 7:30, so I'm gonna have to say goodbye, but this was such an amazing experience, and we hope to do this more often. We need more conversations, we need more discussions, and we're so thankful again for the panelists and for everybody who was able to gather today. Bye.